You get closer, buddy?
Auto.
There you go, let me shoe stuff.
Welcome back. Took a little bit of time off from the Camaro because we needed to spend time away from each other, but it's the season. We got to keep moving along. We got an event coming up in Ohio. We're going to go visit our friend Pat. So we're going to make a couple changes to the car. Already made some spring rate changes to it. Talk about more of that in a minute. But we're going to go add something for a little bit of a peace of mind. We have a wet sump oiling system in this car. Traditional, not fancy dry sump. So we want to do a little something extra to protect it. And so we're going to add this guy. If you don't know what this is an Accusump. It's an oil accumulator. This one's made by a company called Canton. They're kind of the main folks. I'm sure there are other people out there that make them. But what this is an oil reservoir that is ready on demand. If your engine sees low oil pressure, this holds 2 quarts of oil, shoots it into the motor, and hopefully saves it. The other cool thing it does is it does pre-oiling. So normally I will sit there and crank the motor over with the ignition off on the starter just to build oil pressure if the car's been sitting for a while, which this does. Now I'll throw a switch. So there's a couple parts that we need to make this work. We're going to stash this in the back of the car, which I've already talked to Canton. They're okay with that. But yeah, let's get it in there. So there are a few things that we need to make this work. Number one is the Accusump here. So this is the unit that holds the oil. This is their electronic race valve. You can do manual valves. There's street valves. This is supposed to be the fancy pants one for racing, since we're fancy pants racers. Some electrical. This is actually the old fuel pump lead, because I don't throw anything out, but that'll be great, because that'll hook up to our gauge cluster and run to the back so we can turn that valve on and off. And then we have a bunch of hoses and fittings. Because this car has an oil cooler, we need to put a check valve in place. Canton sells a check valve, but it's NPT. All our lines are AN. So I had to search around a little bit, and Radium Engineering makes this cool little check valve here that has adapters. So right now it's a -10, male on one side, female on the other. And I'll do this one-handed, but they include whoa, try that again. They include an adapter to turn this into -10 to female ends, which is what we're going to be using. But they also include, which is kind of cool, they've got a reducer to go from like -10 to -8. They've got this O-ring style fitting, so kind of a cool little deal. Hopefully it works out great. And we've got a T-fitting, which is kind of the other critical part, and then some other stuff just to make it all happen. So we're going to remove some ballast from the back of the car to make room for the Accusump. Maybe help my neighbor with whatever he's working on, because I hear a saw running over there. Yeah, we'll get this installed in the car. So the plan had been to mount the Accusump over in this corner here, but it was getting really tight, and I don't have any inner wheel wells back here, so would have gotten rocks and stuff thrown at it. So I made a quick bracket and we mounted it. You can see it pretty well. Kind of under the package tray here, I've got a big piece of frame. I mean, all my rear suspension's tied into it, and it's on that bracket. And I mean, I can move the car with it, so I think it's going to be okay. I've got a nice straight run here off of that fitting up to the engine. Room to work on it. I think it's gonna work. So we're gonna do the non-glorious part and start running some hose. Okay, so now that we have the Accusump all mounted up, we can get the lines put in place. So this is kind of the big contraption that's going in. There's a radium check valve that adapts to this T-fitting. This side will connect to the oil filter or the bypass housing for the thermostat. This one goes off to the Accusump, just like they've got it laid out here. So we'll get that in the car. I've got 2 different fittings to try to kind of get to the back of the car. But yeah, we'll get that in and we should be good to go. So here is the check valve monstrosity after it's put in place. I wound up using 2 adapters because I kind of screwed up which end this was. But not a fan of it, but let's see if it works.
Record for pumping cars, 2 years of JD, then another year for aiding and abetting.
All right, the Accusump is in, and that sucked. You're not going to be able to see anything. Let me get a flashlight. Well, you're not going to be able to see anything, but there is a whole mess of adapters and hoses. This one wrapped in the silver line there, that's the feed to the Accusump. That's the one that was giving me the most hassle. It was leaking. It was just hard to get in there to tighten it up. But I think I got it tight. I've done a heat cycle on it. We'll do another heat cycle in the morning, but there's no more oil than usual under the car. So that takes care of that problem. And then we can corner balance this car. We'll be almost ready for Ohio. So hang out for a minute, and a day's going to go by in an instant here. And yeah, we'll start corner balancing. I did forget to show you all, but the Accusump now is on its own switch. This used to be the switch for the fuel pump back when I did that manually. Now the Sniper controls it. They recommend that you tie it into the ignition so it comes on at the same time, and they supply an extra toggle switch with you so you can shut it off when you don't need it. I had the extra switches, so why not? You just flip both of these up when you want to start the car, it pre-oils, and you're good to go. So yeah, job done. I posted a little bit about the Accusump install on my Facebook last night, and I realized that some people out there may not know what an Accusump is or what it does or how it works. So let me give you the quickie explanation. Car did sit overnight. It was looking for leaks. Everything's good, so we can fire this up. I'm just going to turn on the ignition. More on that in a minute. But back here we have the Accusump. So on one side of the Accusump is air, the other side is oil, and there's a plunger in here. And there's a little sensor right there, and if it detects low oil pressure, I think around 20 pounds, this valve opens and it fires 2 quarts, up to 2 quarts of oil, down that dash 10 line, along the car, and then you can't see it, but once up here, hooks it up to the sandwich plate for the oil filter. So the way this works, if you look at our gauge right now, we've got 0 oil pressure. But the Accusump can also help pre-oil the motor. So this is like a big thing. I used to run the car on the starter before I kicked on the ignition just to make sure everything had oil. This is just a faster way to do it. So watch, I'll kick on this switch. You'll see the oil pressure gauge jump up, and we'll fire up the car. I'll talk about why we fire up the car in a sec, but let's just see it. So there it goes, oil pressure. Okay, so that's how it works. The reason I fired up the car is the Accusump uses the oil pressure of the motor to refill itself. So when I turned it on, you heard that pump. It shot oil into the motor to make sure all the bearings had oil, but we got to get that oil back in there. So when I fired it up, it made around 50, 55 pounds of oil pressure. And if we come back here and look at this gauge, there we are, 55 pounds of oil pressure. So that is a very basic Accusump 101. So it's there. It's designed to protect the motor if we have a momentary loss of oil. The pre-oiling is a total benefit, but if you have a race car and you don't have an expensive dry sump system, it's totally the move. So here we are. It's the last day of the long weekend. I'm gonna get this car corner balanced. I went and picked up some fuel. We're gonna get this car kind of at the bleeding edge of where it needs to be, and we'll be ready for the race in Ohio. So I probably won't bore you too much with the corner balancing. Maybe I'll do some time lapse, but yeah, check it out in a minute. Well, I said I would do a time lapse on corner balancing, but as it turns out, didn't really have to. we made a bunch of changes to the car over the winter. You know, went from 2 batteries down to 1, added fuel injection, added the carbon fiber T-tops, changed the rear arrow, changed the front arrow, messed with a bunch of stuff, and turns out it was already pretty spot on. So I'll throw the numbers on the screen. Basically, this is what I need to weigh. The class minimum is 3,000 pounds. This is with a full tank of gas, which is 31 pounds. So if I'm on fumes, I'm illegal, but this car doesn't burn that much, so I should be totally good to go. I added a scotch of rear ride height to it, expecting the springs to settle. We did do spring changes, so I went up in the back and softer in the rear. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much ready to go. I still need to check valve lash. I'm pretty guilty about that. I did look at the logs. They looked good, but I need to check valve lash and then I'm 100% good to go. But for now, in case you can't tell, it is ungodly hot out here. So I'm going to call this a win and wrap this up. And next time you see me, I'll be on my way to Ohio. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Share it with your friends. I know this isn't an action video, but we're in the season of action, so more to come. Anyway, I'm hot. See you later.